something truly historic is happening right now with American drug policy. It's a shift that could unlock billions of dollars for businesses, totally revolutionize medicine, and completely reshape public health. So let's break down what this great rescheduling really means and why it's got so many people talking.
You know, this whole thing really boils down to one simple but crucial question. The way the federal government answers it is going to have massive consequences. Because the decision is basically this. Is cannabis treated like heroin, or is it treated like a common prescription medicine?
Okay, so to really get what's going on here, we first need to make sure we're all speaking the same language, legally speaking. And it all comes down to one key action.
And that one key action, it's called rescheduling. Now, let's be super clear. This is not legalization. Think of it more like a bureaucratic refiling, but one that is incredibly powerful because it reclassifies a substance within the government's own system.
And this is where the policy rubber really meets the road. For over 50 years, think about that, 50 years, the federal government has put cannabis in the exact same box as heroin, Schedule 1. That means it's defined as having no medical use and a high potential for abuse. The proposal is to move it all the way down to Schedule 3, right alongside things like Tylenol with codeine. And that category explicitly acknowledges medical use and sees a much, much lower abuse potential. This single shift is the entire battleground.
So you might be thinking, this sounds pretty reasonable. Why wouldn't everyone be on board? Well, for a very significant group of lawmakers and public health advocates, this move isn't just wrong, it's dangerously premature. So what's the case for keeping things exactly as they are? Well, it's a case built on some serious public health data and some very deep safety concerns. This quote from Representative Pete Sessions, man, it really gets to the heart of the fear here. The big worry is that rescheduling sends the absolute wrong message, especially to young people, by basically giving a federal stamp of approval to a substance they see as really harmful. And look, this isn't just a gut feeling for them. They're pointing to some pretty startling data. Opponents are citing studies that suggest for people who use marijuana, the addiction rate is as high as 30%. That is a huge number that they argue we just can't afford to ignore. And it's not just the addiction rate, it's the sheer scale we're talking about. Back in 2022, nearly 18 million Americans were using it every single day. To put that in perspective, that number now outpaces the rate of daily alcohol use in the US. And okay, beyond addiction, they're pointing to some really specific physical health risks. The research they cite connects cannabis use to a 25% increased risk of a heart attack and get this, a staggering 42% increased risk of a stroke. I mean, these are the life and death concerns at the absolute center of their argument. And the list of concerns just keeps going. They argue there's still no slam-dunk scientific proof of its medical value, that the super high-potency THC we see today is a totally different beast, basically a hard drug, and that it's linked to serious mental health issues like psychosis. There's even a pretty wild concern that the tax breaks from rescheduling could accidentally help illicit operations run by foreign cartels. But of course, that is only one side of the story. For a massive coalition of businesses, scientists, and patients, this isn't some big risk. It's a long overdue and frankly monumental change. So what about the other side? What's driving this incredibly powerful push for change? Well, it's a potent mix of economic reality, a desire for medical recognition, and a huge opportunity for science. This quote from an industry leader, Charlie Bachtell, pretty much says it all for the proponents. For them, this whole thing is about the federal government finally catching up with what's already happening on the ground in dozens of states, and with what millions of patients are already experiencing. And a massive piece of this puzzle, it's plain old economic survival. This chart here shows how profit margins in the legal cannabis industry have just been squeezed, dropping nearly 10 percentage points in only a few years. A lot of these state legal businesses are really struggling under the current federal rules. So, what does moving from Schedule I to Schedule 3 actually do? Well, it sets off this incredible chain reaction. First, it kills a crippling tax burden that has basically been choking the industry. Second, it grants formal federal acknowledgement of its medical use. Third, it finally throws open the doors for desperately needed research. And fourth, it starts to align federal policy with the 40-plus states that have already legalized medical cannabis. Okay, so that's the high-level view. But what does this actually mean, like in the real world for businesses and scientists?
Well, the ripple effects would be immediate, and they would be huge.
All right, let's talk about the single biggest, most immediate impact, getting rid of something called IRS Code 280E. Right now, because they're technically trafficking a Schedule 1 substance, these companies can't take normal business deductions. This has led to some of them paying effective tax rates of over 70%. Rescheduling ends that just overnight. It would free up massive amounts of capital.
And for science? Oh man, this is a seismic shift. For decades, American researchers have been completely hamstrung by federal red tape. Rescheduling lowers those barriers, finally allowing our top universities and hospitals to conduct the kind of serious, robust clinical trials we need to figure out exactly what cannabis can and can't be used for.
But look, this isn't all simple and straightforward. This move also shoves the country straight into uncharted waters, and it's raising some really complex questions about public health, safety, and the law that are nowhere near settled. And this question from public health expert Kathy Bradley, wow, it really nails the anxiety at the heart of the public health community. Many of them are worried that the policy is moving way, way faster than the science. They argue we just don't have the guardrails yet, that deep, evidence-based understanding of the risks to manage this shift safely.
Getting that signature on the dotted line, making this final call, it is not simple. It involves this incredibly complex web of competing interests. It's not just politicians versus business owners. For instance, some labor unions have warned this is just a tax giveaway for company owners, without any guarantees for the workers who actually power the industry. It just goes to show you, not every reaction to this news is a celebration. Okay, so let's boil all this down. What are the key takeaways you absolutely need to remember? Number 1, rescheduling is not legalization. That's a big one. Number 2, it's a huge tax break that will completely change the industry's finances. Number 3, it unlocks a ton of research, but experts worry we're moving too fast without those safety guardrails. And finally, this is not the end of the debate. It's the beginning of a whole new chapter that's going to affect everything from your job to your bank.
So at the end of the day, this historic shift completely reframes the entire conversation. The question facing the country is no longer if cannabis is going to be a part of American society. The real question now is how. How are we going to regulate it, research it, and integrate it safely for all the years to come?